When Prime Minister Narendra Modi publicly praised Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan this week, it wasn't just a diplomatic compliment. It was a signal, a message to Washington, and perhaps to the entire world, that India is ready to reset, reshape, and redefine its relationship with the United States. After months of strained communication, rising trade disputes, and tense military posturing, this single moment, Modi invoking Trump's name in a positive light, has set off a wave of speculation across diplomatic circles. Is India once again pivoting closer to America? Or is this a carefully crafted geopolitical chess move meant to balance both Washington and Moscow at the same time? Let's go back a few months. The relationship between New Delhi and Washington was under serious stress. The U.S. had been increasingly vocal about India's continued oil imports from Russia, its neutral stance on the Ukraine conflict, and its growing trade with nations that Washington sees as adversaries. Meanwhile, India was facing pressure on multiple fronts: tariffs on steel and tech exports, tightening visa regulations for Indian professionals, and a dollar surge that pushed the rupee to record lows. Every sign pointed toward friction. Yet behind the scenes, there were quiet backchannels, subtle diplomatic phone calls, and a shared understanding. Both countries needed each other more than ever before. When Donald Trump's name enters this story, everything changes. Trump's earlier presidency had been defined by a unique bond with Modi, a kind of political chemistry that broke the usual rules of diplomacy. Howdy Modi in Houston, Namaste Trump in Ahmedabad. Those weren't just photo ops. They were statements of alignment, of shared populist energy. Now, years later, as Trump reemerges on the world stage and the U.S. elections near, Modi's words carry weight not just in India but in the American political ecosystem. By praising Trump's Gaza peace plan, an initiative designed to stabilize the Middle East and indirectly reduce China's leverage, Modi has effectively placed India back in the U.S. strategic conversation. Analysts are reading this move as a subtle recalibration. It's not just about Gaza or Israel or Palestine. It's about perception, timing, and narrative. Modi's India wants to project itself as a global stabilizer, a country that can talk peace while defending its own strategic interests. Trump's proposal, controversial as it was, had one key feature that aligns with India's thinking. It favored bilateral dialogue over third-party mediation, exactly the principle India has always advocated for on issues like Kashmir. So Modi's praise wasn't random. It was symbolic alignment. It said India stands for peace. But on its own terms, inside the corridors of power in Washington, this statement did not go unnoticed. In fact, diplomatic sources suggest that within hours of Modi's comment, several high-level calls were made between the U.S. State Department and India's Ministry of External Affairs. The message: a willingness to reopen discussions on the stalled trade deal, defense cooperation frameworks, and maybe even technology transfer talks that had been frozen since the tariff disputes earlier this year. And while neither side officially confirmed these developments, the tone of public statements from both capitals began to shift. Suddenly, there was less confrontation in press briefings and more emphasis on strategic cooperation and shared democratic values. But what's really going on behind this shift? The truth is, India and the United States are both facing pressure, but from different directions. For India, the rise of China's assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific, coupled with Russia's limited capacity to fulfill certain defense commitments due to ongoing sanctions, means diversification of alliances is crucial. For the U.S., as it deals with Middle Eastern instability and an uncertain European front, India remains one of the few large democratic powers that can balance China's influence. So both sides are, in essence, being pushed together by circumstance, but each is moving cautiously, ensuring they don't lose leverage in the process. Now, imagine the visual of this moment. Modi, standing on an international stage, his words echoing across the diplomatic world. We welcome any peace initiative that brings stability and prosperity to the region. Behind that calm phrasing lies years of geopolitical calculation. Every syllable is measured. Every compliment has a purpose. When he praises Trump's Gaza plan, he isn't just complimenting an idea. He's reopening a channel of trust with a political figure who could very well return to power in Washington. India knows how to play the long game, and Modi, being a master strategist, is keeping all his doors open. Back home, this message has also sent ripples through India's domestic political landscape. Supporters hail it as another example of Modi's global stature, a leader who can navigate superpower rivalries while keeping India's interests front and center. Critics, on the other hand, accuse him of tilting toward a controversial figure and undermining India's non-aligned legacy. But in reality, this is less about ideology and more about pragmatism. In today's world where alliances shift overnight and economic dependencies define foreign policy, Modi's gesture is about maintaining flexibility, being everyone's friend, but on India's terms. Let's also not ignore the timing of all this, as Trump rallies support back home and positions himself for another potential White House run. His campaign rhetoric includes strong praise for India, especially for its economic rise and tough stance against China. Modi's acknowledgement, therefore, could be seen as a mutual signal, a way of saying the friendship isn't forgotten. If Trump returns to power, India would already have a head start in re-establishing top-level access and policy coordination. And even if he doesn't, Modi's words still serve as a gentle reminder to the current U.S. administration that India remains an indispensable partner, one that cannot be pressured but must be persuaded. Meanwhile, economic indicators tell another part of this story. Bilateral trade between India and the U.S. has crossed $200 billion, but is showing signs of slowdown. Tariffs on tech goods, pharma exports, and agricultural products have created friction. By publicly praising Trump, a figure associated with bold trade negotiations, Modi could also be signaling India's readiness to renegotiate terms from a position of strength. He knows that the U.S., struggling with inflation and supply chain constraints, needs stable partners like India to ensure continuity in global trade flows. Geopolitically, the Gaza issue provides the perfect backdrop for this maneuver. While the Middle East burns under renewed tensions, India is positioning itself as a bridge, maintaining relations with Israel, deepening ties with Arab nations, and emerging as a neutral mediator with credibility. Modi's reference to Trump's plan, therefore, reinforces India's global image as a peacemaker, a country that doesn't pick sides but promotes dialogue. It's a narrative that fits perfectly with India. As upcoming G20 initiatives and its expanding diplomatic outreach across Africa and the Indo-Pacific. Let's talk about perception in Washington. For us strategists, Modi's comments come as a welcome change after months of frustration over India's closeness to Moscow. By aligning rhetorically with Trump, a leader known for a more transactional approach to alliances, Modi is signaling that India is open to business-like partnerships based on mutual interest rather than ideological alignment. That's music to American ears, because the U.S. wants partners who deliver, who buy weapons, invest in supply chains, support maritime security, and counter China's Belt and Road, and India fits that bill perfectly. The deeper truth, however, is that this moment reflects a bigger realignment in global power politics. As the world becomes multipolar, countries like India are no longer just reacting to global events, they're shaping them. When Modi praises a U.S. initiative, it's no longer just symbolic. It changes diplomatic equations across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. It affects how China recalibrates its stance, how Russia views India's long-term commitment, and how smaller nations in the Indo-Pacific position themselves. In essence, it amplifies India's voice, making it clear that New Delhi's opinion matters in every global conflict, from Gaza to Ukraine to the South China Sea. And that's the real story here. This isn't about Trump or Biden, left or right. It's about India's transformation into a geopolitical heavyweight capable of influencing outcomes beyond its borders. Every statement from Modi is part of a larger design, a design that seeks to ensure that India isn't a follower, but a leader in shaping global policy debates. By invoking Trump's name, Modi has sparked exactly what he wanted: attention, conversation, and renewed engagement with the United States at multiple levels. Even U.S. media outlets, which had been largely critical of India in recent months, began to cover Modi's remarks with a new tone, calling it a sign of thaw and an opportunity for renewed dialogue. Investors see this as a potential softening of tensions that could reopen stalled investment talks in defense, tech manufacturing, and clean energy. And behind closed doors, Indian diplomats are already preparing for a series of follow-up meetings that could lay the groundwork for a mini reset between the two nations. Ultimately, this 40-minute story of geopolitics comes down to one truth. In the modern world, diplomacy isn't about ideology. It's about strategy. Modi's comment on Trump's Gaza plan might look small, but it carries massive geopolitical weight. It tells the world that India chooses engagement over isolation, dialogue over division, and national interest over external pressure. It's a move that strengthens India's bargaining position with both Washington and Moscow and positions New Delhi as a central player in the evolving world order. So, as global analysts debate whether this marks a true India-US reset or just a tactical play, one thing is certain: Modi has once again shown that words, when used wisely, can shift power, perception, and partnerships. And in the great game of geopolitics, that's exactly how you win, not with force, but with timing, vision, and mastery of narrative.